So in this video I'm going to explain some very basic music theory on the guitar. Basically, I'm going to show the concepts of going up and down by pitch, which is central to music. So, basically everyone knows there's low pitch and high pitch, and every note is arranged somewhere from low to high. So if you think of a piano, basically as you go left, right, you go down the notes, and as you go right, you go up the notes. The reason a lot of music theory is confusing to learn on the guitar is that things are laid out a bit more complicated, and there's always more than one way to go up and down, which is a reason that guitar can be very confusing to beginners. So I'm kind of going to break that down now. So, basic physics, if you take a string and you make it shorter, you're always going to go higher pitch, right? The vibrations are going to be higher pitch. And if you have a thinner string, also you're going to have higher pitch, right? And a third thing, if you increase the tension in a string, you're going to have higher pitch. So out of these three things, two of them we actually use to make melody. We manipulate it with our left hand. The third one, increasing or decreasing the tension, that's how you tune the guitar, right? But you don't change that usually while you're playing. So changing the length of the pitch of the string basically means putting your finger down on a fret, right? And then the vibrating section of the string is smaller, so you get a higher pitch. So that's the one way on a guitar that you move up in sound, right? In terms of pitch. So basically, right? When a string becomes half as long, you go up a whole octave. So that's what you do with the 12th fret. Right? Now, the second thing, having a thinner string, that's why we have multiple strings on the guitar. So moving up like that. So this string is 2 full octaves up from this string, right? So now the reason guitar can be confusing in terms of learning music theory is that you can get the same note from a lot of different places, right? The reason for that is you can have a long string that's vibrating like this, where the string itself is very thin, or you can have a short section of a thicker string vibrating, right? Like here. So for example, this note, right, the 12th fret on the first string, on the low E string, is the same note as the 2nd fret on the D string, right? The most extreme example, this high E, right? You can get it in all those different places, and it's all the same note. Now, again, in contrast to the piano, on a piano you do a scale by just pressing each key, right, in a row that you want to press, and each key is just one note, and there's only one way to play each note. So, in summary, on a guitar, there's always 2 ways that you can go up. So up in pitch, right? To go to a higher note, you can always go down the string, so go to a higher string, right? Like that. Or you can move up the fretboard, so this way, right? So that direction and that direction always gets you to a higher note, right? In the opposite, going up the strings, so moving to a lower string, and going down the fretboard always gets you to a higher note. So for example, pick some random note. If I'm here and I want to go up a whole step, right, I can go like that, or I can move to that corresponding note on the next string, right? So when you take a 3-note phrase, there's always all of these different ways that you can play it, right? Some are more theoretical. You're not actually going to do that because there's no reason you would. And then moving down the notes, again, the same thing. So if I'm here and I want to go down a whole step, I can always go like that, right? Or I can move to the corresponding note on the lower string, right? So and then the times when you actually have to change string are if you're here on an open string, right? The only way you can go down is by going, so open G string, the only way you can go down is by going to the lower note, to the lower string, right? Because there's no F here. And then if you want to stay in the same position, so like let's say you're in first position, your fingers are like this, you don't want to use the 5th fret, you don't want to have to slide your hand. So from this D sharp, then the only way I could go to the E would be to switch strings, right? So, in terms of some practical illustrations, what this means is there's always, let's say, one scale, you could come up with 100 different ways to just play the C major scale, this basic scale, right? So here I'm using open strings whenever I can. Here I switched over with one position, so I'm using the 5th fret. I could also just do the whole thing on one string, right? And I can come up with ways where any point along the scale is just arbitrary, where I decide to switch strings. So again, contrast this to the piano where each note is just one key. So there's only one way to play a C major scale there, right? So understanding this logic is really helpful for playing and improvising and being able to kind of play back melodies that you hear, because a lot of people will focus a lot on memorizing finger positions, so memorizing, basically getting finger memory to playing specific scales, but that kind of leaves you paralyzed when you're not in that exact position, right? But it's better to kind of focus on the notes and understand the intervals and how you can get these intervals between any two strings, and like how you can get the same interval using different patterns, and now it's essentially the same thing. And then you'll have all these different paths to playing the same melody or the same scale at your fingertips without having to memorize all these positions.